to this episode of Lead the Machine, where today's leaders and tomorrow's talk about the human side of AI at work. I'm your host, Kirsten Marr, and today I'm thrilled to welcome someone who's played an important role in my leadership journey, Bill Walsh. Bill and I first met over a decade ago when he served as a board member at Valid Analytics. At the time, I was CMO before taking over as president. He's not only been a mentor for me, but one of the most insightful, grounded leaders I've had the privilege of working with. And once you hear his perspective, I think you'll understand why. Bill brings more than 40 years of executive leadership experience across enterprise software, analytics, logistics, and AI driven solutions. He's currently the CEO of MediaFly, a sales enablement and content platform used by over 100,000 professionals. Before that, he was the founder and CEO of Aptology, a behavioral analytics company that used AI to help match people to the right roles, way before everyone started talking about Gen AI. Bill's resume is a masterclass in transformation. He's led companies through hypergrowth, M&A, product innovation, and cultural change. As CEO of Navis, he drove 70% revenue growth and launched the industry's first automated container terminal system. At Zebra Technologies, Epiphany, Octane Software, PeopleSoft, and many others, he's repeatedly stepped in to scale teams, rebuild organizations, and unlock growth in tough markets. He's also served on the boards of private and public companies, taught as an adjunct professor, and coached Fortune 500 leaders, bringing a rare combination of strategic vision and deep operational know-how. Today, you'll hear Bill share what makes AI adoption succeed or fail, how leaders should think about organizational readiness, and why putting humans at the center is more essential than ever. So let's dive in. Bill, welcome to Lead the Machine. We're lucky to have you. You've had a long arc through the evolution of technology and analytics. We know there are early adopters, some who wait to follow, and others who might refuse to move. How have you seen this play out with past technological innovations? And do you see AI doing the same thing or changing that trajectory at all?
Yeah, first of all, Kirsten, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for the very kind and flattering overview. I think when we're done, we should talk about you being my PR person. You did such a great job, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
The good news or bad news about having 40 years of experience means you've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of changes, and yeah, and AI is a big one and the most recent, but certainly when you go back and you think about, doing business when there were no cell phones, doing business when there was no email. I actually can't even imagine what we were doing back then, but I was a part of it, so someone was doing it. Being in a world that didn't really have the internet, didn't have the ability to shop online. All of these were major, major changes, and people had to get used to them. I think as I've watched in my career moving through different technologies, you did see people kind of opt out
Mhm.
who were just at
Yeah.
the end of their careers. Our parents and grandparents had said, I'm never going to pick up that computer. I don't want that phone. They learned everything they want to learn and they're done. I think most of us, though, eventually adapt. Of course, you've got that product adoption curve. You've got the innovators and the early adopters that jump in, and then you move all the way to the laggards who eventually get there, but they're going to wait till everyone else adopts it. So I think with all technology, you're going to have this adoption curve, and AI will be no different. Probably the best example I would use for AI is that first dot-com boom in the late 90s, early 2000s, versus where the dot-com world and online commerce went. In the early days, people talked about bricks versus clicks, and which way is the market going to go, and could you really order things online, and does that make sense? And I think there was a lot of hype with the first .com bubble, as it turned out, in the marketplace. People lost a lot of value there. But what happened is people figured out what worked. People figured out the practicality of it. And you can't imagine a world today where we're not shopping online and we're not interacting online. And all the naysayers from the early 2000s, are out on Amazon and every other place you can be online. So I think AI is similar in that, unlike workplace technologies, the .com era and AI is going to affect all of our lives. Whether we want it to or not, we're going to see it. It's going to impact us. Now, will we use it proactively? Will we build it into our own businesses and our own companies? I think that will follow the product adoption curve, and you'll see everyone move along that curve. And I think you'll have some people that will opt out. I think this is sort of the end of the journey. Time for me to move on to retirement and do something different. So I think AI is going to be a little bit more like the .com. I think we are in that .com version one right now with AI, where everything's AI and everything is the promise, and it's very exciting and very scary. I think it will settle down, and I think it will find its place in a very practical, usable way.
So, given the fact that there's just going to be a percentage of people, they're not coming along for this journey, do you think as organizational leaders that we have an opportunity to maybe be better at identifying that in our teams and making the appropriate moves? If you're not going to get there with us, this may or may not be the place for you. But almost to me more important, in the middle, the people who can move but wait too long. Do you think there's a way of thinking about leadership that maybe we can be better at, like figuring out what to do with different groups of people and figuring out which group they're actually in? Because sometimes the ones in the middle can feel like they're not going to get on board. They just might need more clarity. They just might need to see more early wins. What do you think is the opportunity for us to kind of do better people management around this change?
Yeah, I mean, I think my overall view of leadership is you lead by example,
Mhm.
you establish trust, you promote transparency, you communicate often, and you manage with empathy. And that's just a general view of how I think of leadership. I
Mhm.
think all of that applies to adopting a technology like AI. And I would encourage people, first of all, to lead by example. If you are a senior person in an organization, I think you can't ignore it. I think you have to read up on it. I think you have to use it. I like to talk about things in crawl, walk, run. So read about it. Maybe that's your crawl, and then use it a little bit. Start to dive in, start to use it, even if you're just gathering information. How great that can be the first time you went out and used it and said, "This is amazing, the amount of information you get." But I think getting your hands on it, starting to play with it is really important. From an organization as a whole, I think getting something internally, like Glean is a good example. We actually brought Glean into the company for internal use, to look at our information, to pull our data together. But then it allows people to say, hey, this is really exciting. This is kind of cool. Maybe I can now build agents that do specific things for me that were really hard tasks in the past. And so once you get comfortable internally in a company and it's a little safer environment to practice, you can start to think about, hey, how could my customers use this or how might they use this? And what could I build that would be meaningful and different for a customer and something maybe that they would pay for on top of what they're already doing? And I think that's a very careful, gentle way of getting people from mild curiosity to leaning completely into AI.
That's really interesting. So, because I know we've talked, and we certainly saw this in predictive analytics, both with your time at Vallum, but also your time at Aptology and lots of other things that you've done. Most of the time, it's not the technical pieces that hold an organization back. It can come down to when you bring the tech into operations, into people's, individual work, it becomes foundational. And so if you kind of expand a little bit on the experience of it really helps get an organization on board. what other components do you think make an organization ready to adopt something like AI?
And I guess my question is, when you say ready to adopt AI, do you mean internally in the organization to use it or to build it as part of your offering to your customers?
Yes.
Because they're very
So,
different use cases.
yeah, I guess I would go more toward how do you get internally ready so that you can offer this to your customers, assuming you're in an organization like, a lot of the organizations you and I have been in, where we're tech providers, we're expected to be on the leading edge. Our customers, and we'll get to the hurdles around that in just one second, but if our customers are expecting us to be technology leaders and to start incorporating this into our product, what needs to happen internally for us to actually be organizationally ready?
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think the first thing every company does is you realize AI is important. So you make sure you blast it all over your materials, you put it all over your website, even if you really don't have any AI. And
Mhm.
I think every company has probably done that. The second thing is what I said. I think starting to use it internally in a safe environment. I think that's a really interesting way to do it because a lot of the reason people don't like change, and let's be honest, this is just change. It has a technological name to it and it gets a lot of attention in the media today, but it's just change and people are generally afraid of change. Well, the way you make sure they're not afraid of change is you have them do it and they realize, they're still fine and it's okay and you can figure things out. I think as you start to think about it as a product or service for your customers, you need to remove friction. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, whenever you want people to use or buy one of your products, you need to remove the friction, which means make it easy to use, easy to buy, easy steps. And how you do that is by baking it into the product itself. You don't want people to have to go somewhere else to do the AI version of what you're doing or do something special. You want it to be part of the overall experience, part of the overall motion of what you do in the company. And so baking it into the product is really important. But you should only bake it into the product if it's actually going to save them a task. If it's going to do a task for them, make their life easier, not just doing AI to do AI. And you see this a lot of all technology hitting us now. You have a little AI prompt and you hit it. That really didn't do much for me, but thank you for putting that on there. You really want to save them time or save them trouble. And that's, to me, the way I like to think about it. You don't always have to charge your customers for it. But a question is, would someone pay to remove this task from their life? Would someone pay to shorten the time frame to complete this task in their life? And if the answer is yes, you're probably onto an interesting AI use case.
So it's basically use the good discipline of product management instead of chasing the shiny thing and putting the AI thing, and we'll talk a little bit later about the pressures to rush stuff out, but use good product management discipline. What is the customer problem I'm solving, or what is the new opportunity my customers can now pursue if I embed this into our product offering versus thinking about it as a separate thing?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, at a super high level, it needs to solve a problem, not be a science experiment. And the next, double click on solving a problem is imagine you were doing an ROI, right? It's not necessarily easy for everyone to do an ROI on something, but if I'm using this AI, it should either increase my sales, reduce the time it takes me to do something, allow me to do something else. There's got to be a return on this effort that the AI is putting into it. And that's a way to think about the entire problem.
Yeah. And so let's assume we got that. Let's assume, all right, we've done our good product management. We've, thought about the customer backward. We think we have a good solution. So let's talk about the next place that this gets very hard to take to market on the contracting side of things. So I
Yeah.
know from software and tech and analytics, customers want you to be on that leading edge and bringing them new solutions and being the ones who tell them, how this can help their business. Then comes procurement. And they will say things like, we don't want you using AI. We want you to use AI, but we don't want you to use our data. We want you to do this, but we don't want to take any risk in it. What have you seen in terms of what happens on the contracting side of things when you try to implement something as innovative as AI?
Still fluid. I mean, there isn't really a solid answer yet. And so what you see with customers is they're either very afraid of this, so they're locking everything down. And a lot of this goes industry by industry. It would make
Hmm.
sense. Financial services would be an industry that's really going to have to be careful, and they might lock everything down. So you're going to have the most stringent requirements with a financial services company. I think there are a handful of companies that haven't figured it out yet, so haven't really come up with their compliance takes. Generally speaking, with your own customer base and even with prospects, my advice is always do an opt out. Don't put it in place that you're going to use AI in what you're doing and make them opt out of it. Because I think there is a lion's share of your customers that don't have super strong policies yet, and it'd be better to have it baked in the contract that you can do this. And for the ones that have already established the policies, that's going to be an ongoing negotiation. I think you have to tell a story though, which is if we can avoid doing these things, but these are the things you're going to miss. And that's a trade-off. It's a risk reward.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's fine. But I think as you're developing your tools, I think you have to be thinking about all of the privacy compliance stuff, whether it's GDPR or HIPAA or SOC 2. So if you're starting with that, because that's what other companies are going to look to as well, are these different
Mhm.
compliance areas. And if you're meeting those compliance, I think you're going to meet, yeah, again, 80% of customers' needs, but you're still going to have 20% that are probably extra careful.
And anyone selling these solutions knows what has happened to the InfoSec questionnaires that we're all getting. They've only ballooned in, with all of this. I mean, it's very difficult. So let me just keep throwing hard ones at you. That kind of builds on what we just said. So data is pretty much a mess everywhere. Um, and given that, and given that, I don't know of any investor who says, oh, spend the next 5 years cleaning up all your data before you do anything, and we'll wait for, you to get in this AI train and produce, actual value. That's, not really the reality most of us live in. So how do you recommend that companies find a place to start with data to enable AI?
Yeah, I mean, at the highest level, a way to think about this is even the most advanced models will perform poorly if the underlying data is fragmented, low quality, inaccessible, or outdated. So it's the garbage in, garbage out philosophy. I don't care how great the model is. If the data's no good, you're not going to get a good result. So when you turn that around and break that down the other way, as you look at your data, you want to make sure it's accurate. So make sure there's no mismatches, make sure there's no duplicates, make sure there's no outdated things. You want consistency. So the same definitions across teams and across time. So if you're looking for longer looks of data, longitudinal type things, you want to make sure that these names didn't change over times. Sounds like a simple thing, it's a labeling thing, but it makes a big difference from a data
Mhm.
perspective. You want to make sure it's complete so
It's
that
it's
all the
simple,
feet.
but it sounds simple, but it's hard.
That's true. No, that's true. But the results will be impacted if you don't do that. You want to make sure it's complete, right? No missing fields, because any missing fields will dramatically reduce your results. And again, I said this earlier, but timely. You may have changed and pivoted as a company 5 years ago. Then the data beyond 5 years probably isn't terribly relevant to what you're trying to do. So you want to make sure you have timely data, and then you have to make sure it's unified. Right now, we live in a world with a bunch of silos. I have my ERP, I have my CRM, I have my. You need to make sure you can pull all this data together because it interacts or it could and should interact. And so if you clean those elements up, and they're never going to be perfect, but if you focus on that and you put some effort into that, like sowing seeds, you're going to like what grows later on when you apply AI to it.
And for those of us who have been long, on our soapbox about clean the data, clean the data, clean the data, it hasn't gotten the attention that it needs in most enterprises. And this is part of the reason that employees can be resistant because they're like, I don't trust this data. I don't know how you could possibly make a model. And you're asking me to trust something, to your point, garbage in, garbage out. So, how do you recommend companies look at where they think they can do those things you just said and where they should hold off in some cases because they can't fix all their data? So, how do you sort of parse out, okay, this is a place where I think the data can be ready, and here's where we should absolutely hold off and let the data project run in the background in more of a long-term, use case. How do you make those tough decisions?
So I used the word earlier of friction when you had asked me how do you move into this quickly, and I said you have to make it frictionless. So what we're looking for is an opportunity that is high value and low friction. So that's the place I think you should plant your flag and start as an exercise. So what might those be? Sales content personalization is a great example. Predictive forecasting, customer churn analysis,
Hmm.
marketing recommendation engines, knowledge and search. These are the type of things that don't have crazy varying elements to them.
Yeah.
So very low friction, but very high value. If you can figure out the exact content that customers look at and use to buy, and you can ignore the rest of the content that's just confusing it, or put the content in the right order every time you sell, you're going to drive sales. If you can look at a customer's signals and based on signals realize you're about to lose this customer and jump in and do something to save them, that will save you a lot of money. So these are really, high value and low friction and a great place to start. And as an aside, I know a lot about them because that's what MediaFly does. And so we're fortunate to be in that world. There are many other areas that you'd love to work in, but there's a much bigger data project behind it.
Yeah, much. And so that can be, I'm going to ask you about a framework in a second for boards and executive teams, but that can be a way to think about your product roadmap. Where is the low-hanging fruit where we can actually tackle and wrangle a portion of the data? And then where are we smart to carve out enough time to let that data team work on that data so that when we need our next product release, in a year, 2 years, or whatever it takes, we've actually carved out the time and can leverage that data because you're going to need new products down the road. I think it's
100% true.
requiring, I think AI is putting a megaphone around, you can no longer ignore your data. You get on it now and then worry about your near-term use cases in the meantime, right?
And the truth is, that's always been true.
I know.
To really use technology right, that's always been true. But we've moved from static dashboards in the past
Mhm.
to dynamic information requests, then to predictive insights, and now we're at prescriptive intelligence. But you don't get prescriptive intelligence and predictive insights without solid data. So you could probably still go back to dashboards and keep using
Mhm.
dashboards, but the rest of the world is moving beyond what happened and moving more to what will happen and what do we do about it.
Yeah.
And so if you want to be in that futuristic world, you do need to have data that's going to help you make those decisions.
You do, we've always known this, and yet it's always been hard to prioritize data. It's always been difficult. Let's get in. So I get another hard thing at you. Let's talk about, because of all your experience, both leading companies, but also being on boards, and a lot of people don't like to hear how much boards really influence what happens, but they do. They have a lot of influence, and they want to see things happen faster than is practical, and that's okay that boards push management teams to move faster. That's an okay thing until it's not. And as you think about the dynamic between boards and the CEO and the executive management team, how do you think the two maybe need to have a different conversation about balancing risk, governance, and innovation?
Yeah, I think the board is always going to come at this from a risk and governance standpoint. And the management team is always going to come at it from an innovation standpoint.
Mhm.
And you need that healthy relationship of pull and push to sort of get to the right place. I think I mentioned earlier what some of my personal leadership philosophies are, but I think as you look at this, the transparency element of this is important. So as a board is working with an executive team, making sure they're transparent about what they're doing and what they're looking at, the explainability of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and making sure you can talk through that and you understand it, and then trust. And trust has I think all kind of tendrils that go through the organization, but I think it has to be a very proactive discussion at a board level between the executives. And again, remembering that the board is coming at this from a risk avoidance standpoint and a governance standpoint, I would encourage boards to ask the experts. Remember, people join boards for many different reasons. You don't necessarily have this tag on your name tag, but somebody is the product person and somebody is the accounting person. And
Mhm.
so someone knows the industry that you're in. So people come from different walks of life. Not many of them, and probably very few of them, are actually going to be AI experts. So I think getting some experts, getting some counsel, inviting them into a board meeting, hearing some ideas, I think is important for a board so they can set the right tone that balances, with the management, with innovation. I don't think this would be a problem in a lot of cases, but I would say from a board perspective, if the leaders aren't embracing it, I think it's probably AI is so important to where we're headed. I think the board is probably going to have to be leaning on them to embrace it. And you'll
Yeah.
see differences in different industries of how fast that's adopted.
Yeah, because the board's job is to make sure that the company has the right valuation, and so they do want to see real ROI and real, value creation. So in my mind, the board is both risk avoidance, but also we expect valuation from this, and why can't you deliver it faster? So I see that tug and pull too. Do you?
Yeah, and I would say in most cases, the boards are probably going to be in a position of, as I said, risk avoidance and governance. The companies generally are going to be pushing the envelope on innovation. If you have a company not pushing the envelope on innovation, I think you might have the wrong leader, or at least not exploring the innovation. And obviously, that's a board's decision as well to make sure they have the right leadership team.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So let's talk about maybe the hopeful side. What makes you hopeful about what AI can be doing in business and in organizations? What do you see as the real potential value, even if we just talk in the next 12 to 24 months because it's just moving so fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you have been, Kirsten, we've been in this space for a little bit of time,
Hmm.
and we've stood on the shoulders of many very intelligent people and
Yeah.
dedicated people, and a lot of investment that took us from digital computing in the 40s and 50s and neural networks in the 80s and 90s that actually were kind of on to the AI thing, but they just didn't have the computation ability to and investment to make it happen. And then the machine learning in 2000, which moved back to like phase two of neural networks, where you get the deep learning. And now it's finally here. The promise of this is finally here. Like my internet example before, where your first couple of options were pets.com in 2000 or 2001, and now suddenly the number of things you can do using the internet is amazing. I think we finally have the technology, the computational power, the data out there in the world to really get some great results. And so I am hopeful that we can harness that and get some great results. Now, there are many messages out there about how scary AI is, about how AI is going to replace people, about the dangers of AI. And I do think some of that is going to need to be sorted through. But I think the buzz will die down, and what we'll be left with is real applications, important governance, and then, useful AI that has a sustainable advantage and removes the task off of our plates as humans that we have to do today, but we don't have to do in the future, and allows us to use some of the human advantages that AI can't do. We have a real lived experience, not just a collection of data. AI doesn't have that. We have genuine emotion, not simulated emotion, true creativity, morality, authentic social connection, and most importantly, accountability. And AI will never have those things. And so, if you can take all of the things AI has to give you to make your life easier to focus in the areas that humans really differentiate from I think there will be plenty of jobs for people, but you will need to use AI to be at the cutting edge of your job and to be as efficient as possible.
If you said to people today, oh, you don't need to know about the internet in your job, you don't need to be online, you don't need to use email, I mean, people would be like, that's ridiculous. This is just ubiquitous. Well, AI is going to be just as ubiquitous. So not using it is just not an answer. Right?
That's true, and I think, but if companies build this the right way, it will be involved in everything you're doing. So you don't even have to know it's there.
Yeah.
You just have to realize there are 10 tasks you used to do that now an agent goes out and does for you, and you don't have to be involved in doing that. And
Yeah.
that's an exciting use of AI. Again, I do think there will be a handful of people that opt out.
Okay.
I'm done. I've had enough. I loved my flip phone. I'm not moving forward. But I think if you're in any business going forward, AI will be a part of your business and you'll need to adopt it as part of your workday.
Yeah, you will. So I loved what you said about, all of the different things that humans are always going to bring to the table that would only ever be simulated by AI. And you've done so much mentoring in your career. How do you counsel the up and coming generation who are more afraid of AI, actually, I think, than some of us who have, built our career, have some experience, maybe see it more as a tool. This is something, as I'm talking to Gen Z and millennials, I'm realizing they're actually more, even though they're digital natives, they're more afraid of AI taking the human out of work.
I think it's easy to be afraid of something that is, the monster under the bed. But when
Mhm.
you actually turn the lights on and you look under the bed, it's either not there or it's something else and it's not so bad. So leaning into it and using it a little bit and starting to imagine that would be great if I didn't have to do this. That would be great if I have to send a letter to a customer and I can get a head start on what that letter looks like. The part that you have to always keep is your unique element. And I'll use that example of email creation. I see many people using it right now for their email creation, and it's not great. It gives you a wonderful head start and use it as a head start, but put that human element to it. Ask someone about their job, their vacation, something else. AI can't do that. They're not going to know to do that, but they can give you a great head start. And so I do think it's a partnership going forward between AI and humans. And the more you start to use it, the more you're going to see how it gives you an advantage, but it doesn't do the job for you. And then your fear goes away. In fact, I think the fear turns to joy
Yeah.
because you think, I never really loved staring at a blank sheet of paper and starting from scratch.
Yeah. And if you think about technology innovation in your company, guess what? We're all figuring AI out together. What a great opportunity for you as an up and comer to raise your hand and say, I'd like to help figure out how AI can help us solve different business problems. Like raise your hand and be part of it. Don't sit back and let it, quote, happen to you.
Yeah, and I think be a little bit selfish. Think about the things in your job that AI could do for you that you no longer need to do. And what would you do with that extra time? Hopefully you would tap into the uniquely human elements and use some of that to make your job better, the work environment better, and a better relationship with your customers.
Yeah, because the AI, to your point, when you use it in an email, like people can tell when you just let AI do it. It doesn't differentiate. It's a great helper. It's a great partner. It is not a do it for you in terms of any kind of communication. It's not going to tell your story. It's not going to develop a brand. It's not going to do the company market position in a way that is truly unique to that company, that product, that team, its customer base. That's just not what it does. And so don't let it.
Yeah, I mean, our products and services in the end are for people.
Yeah.
And so AI can give you a lot of ideas, but if I can't take the human view of it and organize things around what's actually going to work for you, then you're not going to buy or continue to buy from me. So you're always going to need to put a human element on it. AI will never know that.
No, it won't. It won't. We're better than we think we are sometimes when we get so afraid that it can just take over. Well, let's see. So what I'm taking away from our conversation, and then let me know if you have anything to add, is keep your leadership principles that you've always had. Don't forget the empathy of people, and what makes good leaders is still makes good leaders. As an employee, still step up and help raise your hand to be part of a change instead of sitting back and waiting for it. Don't forget good discipline and product management. And data is become, a priority number one. Just figure out how you parse your way into what is good data and what you can actually action. And we didn't say this, but you and I have talked about this before. If you move with bad data, you're going to lose customer trust. So building a brand and building customer trust takes a long time. It can be erased really fast if you move too fast. And maybe boards and executive management teams can have more robust conversations about balancing innovation, risk avoidance, governance, and still creating, business value. What would you add to our conversation that maybe I missed in terms of what people can really take away?
I think you recapped everything great. The thing I would probably leave you with is that AI is here to augment humans, not replace them.
Mhm.
And if you keep that in mind, I think you can use it the right way. I think it's a little less scary. I do think there are big chunks of our job today that AI can take over. But if AI can do it, they weren't really interesting chunks of our job, right? They are things that are repetitive and just require data to do.
Mhm.
And that's great. Let someone do that. Let's use our unique capability as humans to add value to what AI is doing and go do the things that AI can't do at all.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of AI. Be afraid of your colleague who leans in and learns it and can leapfrog and upskill themselves. So it's not a competition with the algorithm. It's how do you
That's
leverage
right.
it's how do you leverage
That's
the
right.
algorithm.
Don't fight with data.
Yeah, don't fight with data. I like that a lot. Well, Bill, thank you so much for this conversation. It was really insightful. I appreciate your time. For everyone else, this is always a good dialogue and conversation. Let us know what resonated for you. And we'll see you on the next episode of Lead the Machine.
Thanks again for having me. Bye, Kirsten.